Photoshop Lesson 3 is all about layers and the layers panel and how to manipulate layers and how you stack an image. Layers can be a pain because you have to make sure that within your layers panel you're clicked on the right layer. However, there are some advantages. The main advantage is it's easier to edit and apply styles to independent layers than it is to do it to a flat image. You can also change the order of how things appear when they're in Photoshop. So the first thing you need to do is within Google Classroom, you need to make sure that you download this PSD file. You will actually download 3 to begin. So you need the 04 start, the beach, and the flower 2. So remember, you click on it, you open it up, you open it in a new window, and then you click the download button. Once you have it downloaded, you can go to File, Open in Photoshop, and I have to go. So now that you have it open, first thing, of course, that we're going to do is go File, Save As. So you want to start with the 04 start open on your screen. We're going to go to our digital design folder that's on our desktop. So you can click on Desktop, find your digital design folder. I'm going to create a new folder in there that says Photoshop Lesson 3. And then I'm just going to click Save. Make sure it's a Photoshop file. Okay. So I also need to make this full screen so you can see everything. I'm going to close my tab group so that way you can see my entire layers panel. You should have, if you did it correctly and you've opened it correctly, you should have 5 layers. I will tell you it's going to be very important that when you turn this in, you turn in the Photoshop file so that way you turn in the layers, because the layers are what's going to kill you on your grade if you don't turn in the .psd file. So now we also want to go to File and Open. And you probably have yours in your Downloads folder. Mine's in here. You are going to open the beach.psd. Notice that another tab opens, so it's its own picture. It also says that it is layer 1. We want to rename this layer 1, so you double click on the word and name it beach. So then you type in the name of the file, hit enter, and it sets. On our window bar, let's click on, our menu bar, click on Window, Arrange, to Up. And I don't care if you do horizontal or vertical. I just prefer vertical. Make sure you are clicked on your Move tool. And you're going to click and hold on the beach and drag it to the pineapple. Notice now the beach layer is part of your layers panel at the very top because we didn't have any selected layers. If you had a different layer selected, it would go just above whatever layer you had selected. So now we can close the beach tab. We don't need to save changes. Now we want to make sure that all we can see is the beach. We want to edit our beach layer before we edit anything else. So if you notice next to your layers there are little eyeballs. That shows you if it's visible or not visible. So you can click on them and see how it turns things on. Same is true if you click on them again, it makes things go away. So we want to click so only the beach layer is showing. Notice the background layer, when it's not showing white, it is showing transparent. The checkered board just means that it's transparent and there's nothing there. So now what we're going to apply is a border or a layer style to our layer. So we're going to make our layer look a little fancier. So you go down to the bottom of your layers panel and click on the FX, which is your layer styles. And we're going to click on stroke. Stroke is just the outside of the image. Within the layer styles box that pops up, we're going to change the size to 5, your position to be inside, blend mode should be normal, and then we want to change the color to white. We want to make sure it's a white border. And then you can click OK. Notice now you can kind of see it. There's a white border on the inside of your picture. Now we want to be able to rearrange our layers, because if you turn on every layer, it does not make sense for this beach to be this big, this big on top of the pineapple, but also not on top of the flower or the postage. So we want to make sure that we rearrange our layers. We want to drag this beach layer down so it is in between the flower and the pineapple layer. If you notice, as I'm moving my layer, there is a blue bar that highlights where it's going to put it. So I'm going to highlight between flower and pineapple and put the beach layer there. A good time to go up and go File, Save, just so that way nothing happens as we're clicking through things. We want to click on the postage layer, and we want to change the opacity of the layer. Opacity just means how solid or transparent the object is. So we want to make it pretty transparent. So we're going to put it as 25% transparent. So you can hardly see it now that we've changed the opacity of the layer. Now we want to do a control click on the pineapple layer, because we're actually going to duplicate this layer. We want to make sure that we have just the pineapple, and we're going to duplicate it. And it's okay to call it pineapple copy. It's totally fine, because that's exactly what it is. It's a copy of the pineapple. And now we want to change the blending mode of the layer to overlay. So opacity is right here, right next to where it says normal. That is your blending mode. If you hover over it, it's going to tell you set the blending mode for the layer. And we're going to change that to overlay. Notice when we changed it to overlay, if I turn off that layer for a minute, notice how dull the colors are. They're not very bright. It's kind of a boring pineapple. But when you change the copy layer to overlay, it darkens all of those colors and brightens it up quite a bit. Now we also want to choose for postage. So it's 25% transparent, which is great, but we have a hard time seeing it. So we want to do a multiply. And when you change the blend mode to multiply, it kind of darkens when it's over the top of something. So that way it shows the underlying colors better. We're going to go up and save our progress. So now we need to resize our beach. Our beach is way too big for this image. And we're also going to rotate it a little bit. So let's click on our beach layer. Make it visible if it's not visible. It should be. And we are going to do a Command T, or edit transform is what that is. And we're going to come up to the W and the H on the option bar, and we're going to change that to 50%. Hopefully it's linked so it scales both 50%. And then we're going to change the rotation to a 15. So the W and the H should both be 50%, 50%, and the set rotation should be 15. Then you can press enter twice to set that rotation. Again, make sure your move tool is selected. You haven't selected any other tool. And we're going to move the beach now so the corner is kind of underneath the flower just a little bit, but still over the pineapple. Now, if you notice, everything looks great except for the background. The background is still white. And the nice thing about layers is when you have an image and you're layering on top of it, you can always go back and change the background layer. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to change the background layer to look like clouds. So to do that, we need to first make sure that we click this button right here, which is your default colors. So we're going to click default colors. And then where it's black, we want to click the black. That's considered your foreground color. So click your black, and we're going to change it so the RGB is 48. So R is 48. G is 138. And B, which is your blue, is 174. Now, you could change it a little bit if you would like to. Let's do the clouds and then we'll look at it and see how it looks. So now we're going to go up to Filter, and we're going to go to Render and Clouds, and it's going to create clouds for us. So I think that looks like a pretty nice sky, kind of a sky and the beach kind of is what we're going for. So I'm going to leave the color as is. You could do more blue if you wanted to. You could change it to this color if you wanted to and render it again. But I would say this color is fine for right now. We want to click on the pineapple copy layer, because now we are actually going to add in another layer, and we want it to add right above our pineapple copy. So make sure you're clicked on the pineapple copy. Then I want you to go to your Finder window and click on Finder. So just click on it to bring it up. Your Flower 2 image that you downloaded is probably in your Downloads folder right here. Mine is in here. Oops. Sorry, we did not want to open that. So within Finder, so now you have found it. Sorry, we did not want to open it. You are actually going to click and drag it into Photoshop. Notice how it gave me a plus sign and we added it to Photoshop. This is how some of you were opening a lot of your files in the very beginning of class. So you notice that it created a layer here and it didn't make it bigger or anything like that. It just fit within my image. So this is dragging in a layer. So you can click and drag. Remember we clicked here and drug it into Photoshop and got a plus sign. And hit escape. Oops. So I can drag it in again. Okay. Before you hit enter to set the image, you want to move the flower so that way it's sticking out a little bit, but you want it to be pretty much only in the corner. Then you can hit enter and it sets the layer there. So now we want to work with the text layer, and the text layer is kind of different, as you noticed in one of your colorful text assignment that you guys did. Text layers are their own type of layer. So for this, we want to click on the Hawaii layer, so that way our text appears right above it. We're going to click the type tool, so the T horizontal type tool. And if you do not have it set this way already, which you probably don't, you're going to click to change the font to Birch Standard, so BIRCHSTD, which is your standard. Make sure it says regular. We're going to change the font size to 36. And then we want the AA to be crisp. Make sure your aligning is to left alignment. Then we want to go up to Window and click on Character. We're going to open our Character panel. We want our tracking, which is how far the letters are apart, to be at 250. So 250. We also want it to be all caps and bold. Then we're going to click where it has color, and we're going to change the color. So R is 88, G is 217, and then B is 31. So a nice green. Now you're going to click somewhere below the Hawaii layer, and I'm going to type Island Paradise. And then if you hover below it, notice how it changes to kind of a move tool look. I moved it and centered it. If you can't find how it changes your icon or your mouse, you can always click the move tool and then move it around as well. I just made it so that way it was somewhat centered below Hawaii. And now it says Hawaii Island Paradise. We've done so much. Let's go ahead and do a file save. Make sure we save our progress. Now, everything else we've done stuff to, but we haven't done anything with these white letters. And the white letters are kind of boring. So we want to click on the Hawaii layer, Then you want to do a control click or a right click. So I can do a 2-finger click. And make sure you do it on the thumbnail part of the layer, not the words. So make sure you click in the middle of the picture, and it has to be like a right click or a control click or however, and click select pixels. Selecting the pixels just outlines the layer for you, so that way we can apply something to just this selected area, kind of like we learned in the previous lesson. So now we are going to click on our gradient tool. Our gradient tool, it may or may not be hidden behind another tool, but our gradient tool is what we want. And before we can go up and change anything, we need to change our color on our toolbar to an orange. So we're going to change, so I clicked on the green thing down here, and I'm going to change the R to 255, the G to 170, and B to 0. So a nice rich orange. Then we want to make sure that we've clicked on the little arrow here. Got a drop down menu. We want foreground to background color. And we want it to be linear. So if you hover over it, it'll tell you what kind it is. So a linear gradient. And now we're going to start at the bottom of the H, and we're going to drag straight up. If you have a problem dragging your mouse straight up, you can hit your shift key and it won't move. It'll just go straight up, or it'll do 45-degree angle changes. So I'm going to go straight up, and you're only going from the bottom of the H to the top of the H. Don't go any further than that because it'll throw off how your gradient looks. So we want it to look mostly orange but fades into white. Then we can click on our move tool so we don't accidentally do something else. You can do a deselect, Command D or select deselect. And we're also going to take this time to save. So now that we have all our layers set the way that we want them to set, the way we want them to be positioned, I guess I should say, we need to make them stand out. So like the words, they don't really stand out off the rest of the image. So we want that to actually stand out. And we can do that by applying our layer styles. So we want to click on the Island Paradise layer. And we're going to click on the Layer Styles button at the bottom. So add a layer style. We're going to add a drop shadow. In our drop shadow options, we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. You want the opacity to be 75. You want it to have a 78-degree angle. You want the distance to be 5. The spread to be 30%, so 30. And the size to be, distance to be 5, spread 30, size is 10. And then make sure your color is black. Then you can click OK to set that drop shadow. So now we want to press our Option key and click on the FX part right here on our layer. And we're going to click and hold on that and drag it down to the Hawaii layer. So now we are going to edit the drop shadow because the drop shadow for the Hawaii layer needs to be slightly different. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong thing. We're actually going to add a stroke to that as well. So click on the Hawaii layer, and we're going to click FX, and we're going to click on stroke. So now we're adding an additional layer style to the Hawaii layer. And we want the size for that to be 4. We want it to be outside of the letters. We want the blend mode to be normal. Opacity to be 100%. We're going to change the color to be, the R is 88. The G is 217. And the B is 31. So we want the same green that's in the Island Paradise text. So now we're going to click OK. We're going to click on the flower, so just the plain flower layer. We're going to click on FX and click on Drop Shadow. You want the blend mode to be multiply, opacity to be 60, distance to be 13, and spread to be 9. Make sure it is still black. Then we are also going to now go over and click on where it says satin. And we're going to change the color. So R is 255. G is 0. And B is 108. So a nice hot pink. Click OK for the color picker. You want your opacity to be 20 and distance to be 22. And I'm going to scale my size down probably to a 5. Then I can click OK, and that sets both layer styles. If by some chance your flower is black or you need to edit a layer style because you don't think it looks right, you can always change your layer styles. So you can double click on the FX and it brings back up the layer styles button, and you can go in and say, okay, this isn't right, and you can change it to whatever you want it to be and then click OK. So you can always change your layer styles. They're not set in stone once you set them. You don't have to delete it and try it again. You just have to double click on the FX and click on which one you want to change. So if, for instance, your flower is black instead of the nice purple color, you need to change your color of your satin so that way it looks right. So now let's go ahead and save. We've got a couple more things we're going to do. Now I would like you to click on the Flower 2 layer. The Flower 2 layer, we want it to be slightly brighter. And to do that, we have to click on Window and Adjustments because we're going to make an adjustment to it. And then we are going to click on Hue and Saturation. And with the hue and saturation, you're going to change the hue to 43, the saturation to 19, and you're going to leave the lightness as 0. Notice how it changes everything below that layer. So if I turn off this hue and saturation layer, everything goes back to the way it was. But if I turn it back on, it looks kind of funky. So we want to actually create what's called a clipping mask. And we want this layer, this hue and saturation layer, to only point to the Flower 2 layer. So to do that, you're going to hold down your Option key And you are going to hover between the two layers and notice how it changed to a square with the arrow pointing. And then you click one time and that sets your clipping mask. So a clipping mask is pointing one layer to another to make sure that it fits within or points to just that layer. So now we can save. And everything looks great. However, I would really like these words to be about the same size. So I'm going to click on my Island Paradise layer and I'm going to change the font size. So Island Paradise, click on your character panel or go Window Character. And we're going to change the size to 32 and then hit Enter. So now, as long as your Move tool is selected, you can move it and center it below the Hawaii layer. And I'm just using, so I moved it first and then I'm just using my arrow keys to kind of make sure that it's fully centered to the best of its ability. So now we want to go to File, Save. And the last thing that we're going to do to this to bring it all together, make it look like one decent postcard, is we're going to add a border to the whole image. And to do that, click the postage layer. And we're also going to move the postage, clicked on the wrong thing. So now we're going to click on the postage layer. And you've got to figure out where you can best get a hold of it. Notice I've tried to get a hold of it twice trying to move it and I clicked on the wrong thing. So get a hold of your postage layer and we're actually going to move it down to about the center of the image on the right hand side. So notice kind of where my mouse is at. I'm going to bounce it right here for you. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. And now I'm also going to do a select all. And above this postage layer, because our postage layer is our top layer, we are going to do a new layer before we do anything else. And we're going to go to Select, Modify, Border. And you want it to be 10 pixels wide. So click OK. So now it's moved in that border. Now you can go to Edit, Fill, click on White, so where it says Contains White, and click OK. So now you have a nice white border around your image. We're going to do a Command D so we don't mess anything up. We're going to rename that layer Border. And we are going to go File and Save. I also want to show you real quick, just so you can see my layers panel. You want to make sure that your layers panel matches what mine is. So background from bottom up, background, pineapple, pineapple copy, flower 2, hue and saturation pointed to flower 2, beach, flower, Hawaii, Island Paradise, postage, border. That's what your layers panel should be. Now that you have saved your Photoshop file, You want to make sure you've done it. Again, just to make sure, you can click on Save. Then go to your file and Save As. Save it as a JPEG as well. Remember, it is very, very, very important that when you go to turn in this lesson to Google Classroom, that you turn in the Photoshop file. So let me show you real quick. My digital design folder. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to turn in to Google Classroom this Photoshop file. Then when I go to do my blog is when I turn in the JPEG version. Okay. Again, turn in the .psd file to Google Classroom. If you do not, you will lose a bunch of points on this lesson.